Every music teacher has a version of this story. A student walks in with a trumpet bought on someone's recommendation, a name brand horn, shiny box, full price, and within 18 months, the valves are sticking, the lacquer is bubbling, and the repair quote is half what the instrument cost new. Meanwhile, another student is playing rings around them on a horn nobody in the room has ever heard of. The instrument nobody warned you about. The one the industry has no financial incentive to recommend. Today, we fix that. 5 cheap trumpet brands everyone ignores, and every single one of them is an absolute goldmine. Number 5. Jean Paul USA. This brand sits in a strange position in the trumpet market, respected by the educators and dealers who have actually handled one, almost completely invisible in mainstream instrument retail. While their entry-level TR-330 dominates the beginner conversations, it's their step-up TR-430 intermediate horn that stands as an absolute engineering triumph. Landing closer to the $500 to $550 range, it bypasses the standard beginner shortcuts. The TR-430 features a warmth-enhancing rose brass lead pipe, highly durable monoalloy pistons, and a clear lacquer finish over brass that resists the surface degradation common in cheaper horns, where the lacquer is applied over base metal without adequate preparation. Monel is the same piston alloy used in professional-level instruments. It resists corrosion, holds its tolerances longer, and feels smoother under the fingers than the stainless steel pistons found on budget gear. Band directors in online forums frequently cite Jean Paul USA as the answer when a player needs a long-term horn without a 4-figure budget. Independent reviews note that the TR-430 arrives with valves that require minimal break-in, a detail that matters enormously for an advancing student whose frustration threshold is low. You're buying a horn built to a durability standard that happens to be priced way below the legacy giants. The brand that follows it is even more misunderstood, and for different reasons. Number 4. Mendini by Cecilio. The name alone works against it. Mendini by Cecilio has spent years accumulating the kind of Amazon review skepticism that comes from being the cheapest option in a category dominated by people who learned the hard way, that cheap usually means disposable. Here's where that story gets more complicated. Cecilio Musical Instruments, the parent company, has gone through measurable production improvements, and the current generation of Mendini trumpets, particularly the MTT-L, represents a different engineering calculation than the instrument reviewers were condemning a decade ago. The MTT-L uses a brass body with a gold lacquer finish, standard water keys, and a case package that includes a cleaning kit and a mouthpiece, making the true cost of getting started lower than it appears on the listing price alone. Independent reviewers who have tested recent production runs note that intonation across the register is more consistent than the brand's old reputation suggests, and valve action on new units has stabilized. The legitimate caveat is quality control variance. Mendini instruments are manufactured at massive volume, and the gap between the best and worst units in a production batch is wider than you'd find from a tighter tolerance manufacturer. What that means practically is that buying from a retailer with a solid return window matters as much as the brand choice itself. If you get a good one, and most buyers do, you have a functional, playable horn at a price point that makes early stage commitment to the instrument financially rational. The brand that comes next costs a fraction more and earns every cent of it through a clever design choice. Now, before we get to the top 3, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and how long you've been playing trumpet, or how long you've been trying to find the right horn for someone who is. The pattern we're about to get into is something I want to hear your experience on. Let's continue. Number 3, Easter. Easter is a direct-to-consumer instrument brand under the Donner Music umbrella that has built its presence almost entirely through independent review channels, rather than traditional retail placement, which tells you something about how the mainstream instrument market is structured and whose interests it serves. The Easter ETR 380 is the model that keeps appearing in credible comparative reviews as the clearest example of a horn that outperforms its sub $200 price bracket. The instrument features a brass body, phosphor bronze valve guides, and a lacquer finish applied over a brass surface that has been treated to improve adhesion and longevity. Phosphor bronze guides are a detail worth pausing on. They reduce friction at the valve guide interface, which is one of the first points of wear on a student horn played with anything less than textbook valve technique. The ETR 380 also ships with a robust hard case rather than the soft gig bag common at this price point, which matters for transport durability over a school year. Independent video reviewers who test budget horns systematically have placed the Easter in the top tier of budget instruments based on intonation accuracy and valve response. The brand's direct-backed sales model means there is no traditional dealer markup layer, which is where a meaningful portion of the value gap between Easter and equivalent quality instruments from legacy brands actually lives. You're not paying for a showroom, you're paying for a horn. What comes next proves that consistency can survive in even leaner packaging. Number 2, Glory. Glory is the brand that disappears into the search results behind everything else and somehow keeps showing up in the hands of students whose band directors are quietly relieved. The company produces student trumpets in the sub $200 range that have accumulated a following among budget-conscious educators, not through marketing, but through durability that outlasts the skepticism. The most commonly reviewed Glory trumpet features a brass body, stainless steel pistons, and a distinct layout that reads as a cosmetic choice, but reflects a production process where surface preparation quality is prioritized. Stainless steel pistons at this price require precise machining to fit the valve casing correctly, and Glory's pistons receive enough factory attention in that regard that independent reviewers consistently note above-average valve action for the price. Owner reviews across multiple platforms describe instruments that hold up through full school years, without the valve sluggishness or lacquer deterioration that ends the useful life of cheaper horns before the student has decided whether they even like playing. The total cost of ownership argument is straightforward. A horn that costs under $200 and survives 2 years of student use without major maintenance costs, less per playing hour than a no-name horn that needs a chemical flush and valve alignment by month 8. The brand in first place makes that math even more compelling. Number 1, Hawk. Hawk is the answer that appliance engineers in the washing machine world would recognize immediately. The brand built on a different philosophy that the retail system has no structural incentive to surface. Hawk produces student trumpets that appear in a consistent pattern across independent educator reviews and music forum discussions. Overlooked at first glance, genuinely impressive on closer inspection, and almost entirely absent from the marketing noise that fills the instrument retail space. The Hawk student trumpet features a brass body, nickel-plated or stainless valves built to incredibly tight tolerances, and a finish quality that independent reviewers describe as significantly above what the budget tags suggest. The instrument ships with a case, mouthpiece, valve oil, and cleaning tools, reducing the true startup cost relative to the listed horn price alone. What separates Hawk from the pack at the top of this list is unit-to-unit consistency. Forum discussions and independent review channels that test budget horns at volume note that Hawk instruments show less out-of-the-box variance than most competitors in the bracket, meaning the horn you receive is more likely to match the horn the reviewer tested. That consistency is an engineering and quality control commitment that saves the buyer the return and replace cycle that erodes the value proposition of cheaper instruments. Do the math. A horn that costs beautifully under $300, plays reliably from day one, holds its valve action through a full school year, and doesn't require professional servicing before the student reaches their second year, is a brilliant decision made at a student price. The sticker says cheap. The engineering says otherwise. Here is the rule. Before you spend money on a student trumpet, yours, your child's, your students', ask 3 questions. First, what are the pistons made of, and will they hold their tolerances under daily use? Second, does the horn ship ready to play, or does it require setup work that a beginner cannot perform and a technician will charge you for? Third, what does the total cost look like not at purchase, but at the end of year 2? The 5 brands on this list pass all 3. They are not the brands with the biggest marketing budgets or the longest shelf presence at major retailers. They are the brands where someone made a decision to put the engineering budget into the instrument rather than the packaging. The gap between sticker price and real value in the student trumpet market has never been wider. These 5 brands are where that gap closes. Drop a comment telling me which one you're going to look at first. Subscribe if this saved you from a horn you would have regretted. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.